All right, as we go to air, the Maroons are getting ready in Sydney. They are playing tonight. And if you want to know all about the Maroons, I'm going to ask this man, the author, Rob Burgin, about the title of his book. But a very good morning to you, Rob.
Thanks for having me, John. Always a pleasure to chat with you.
Always, yeah, exactly right. This time of year, there's nothing like it in rugby league, is there?
No, mate. And I've actually got 5 guys from Brazil staying with me from our Brazil Rugby League team. And this is going to be the first time that they've watched Origin live. And for me, it's added a whole other dimension to the day. We're going out later to buy jerseys and polos for everyone. So it's going to be a great day.
You've played rugby league since you were about 10. You've only just recently given it away. What's your earliest memory of Origin?
Earliest memory of Origin was actually my parents weren't into sport at all. And they actually discouraged me from how much I used to be into sport. So I had this little transistor that I secreted away, and I used to put it under my pillow and listen to it with the volume right down so I could remember the games. And actually, when I was writing the Maroons, I spoke to some of the others who listened to games only on radio as children, and how it created this whole other mental imagery to what was actually taking place. And I think it's probably part of the reason I fell in love with rugby league so much is because I envisioned it all in my head, and I could imagine Mal Meninga crashing into people and Sam Bacco, giving it to other guys on the field. And when I watched the games, it was kind of funny to know that it didn't happen quite the way I imagined, but it wasn't too far apart. It was nice.
Well, it's interesting, they say movies are better than the book or the book's better than the movie. So the correlation is there, isn't it?
Yeah.
All right. So your first...
and it's funny because some of the big players like Steve Jackson, who played a big role in Origin, he said he never watched a game on TV as a kid, was always on the radio. And funnily enough, his dad was a mad punter and always used to go for New South Wales because he thought they dominated all the pre-Origin years and he'd win a stack of money by putting his money on the Blues. So a bit of a strange upbringing for a Maroons legend.
Well, of late they'd be doing all right. And the book, The Maroons, mate, this is not your first time. You've played rugby league, you've done a bit of boxing, and an author as well. What got you into putting pen to paper?
I've always just liked creative expression, whether that's performing on the field or performing with a book or whatever sort of form it is, and I like that divergence. I won a grand final with West Mitchelton 1 week before I won a Queensland Scrabble competition. So I've always liked that the geek and the jock kind of breaking the stereotypes a little bit.
All right then. Now, as I say, you've written other books, but the Maroons. Now, this isn't just about the actual game itself. We talk about the correlation between movie and a book. You dig a lot deeper than the actual between the try lines, don't you, with the players and what's become a culture basically in the Eastern Seaboard.
Yeah, I guess a lot of people reference the book Legacy with the All Blacks and how they brought about a culture of its own. And I wondered if I dug deep enough, if I could find out what really motivated all the Queensland players and what epitomises that spirit that we have. I'm not so much interested in recounting the games of old or who scored the most tries or the most points, but I want to know about, who overcame huge adversity as children or for those who did come from quite stable families, what it was that their parents taught them that put them in good stead for the future. So in the Maroons, I'm basically looking at all the formative experiences before the ages of, say, 18 to 20 and how the guys collectively responded to that. So that's a big focus. And then also at the same time, by mere fact of putting together every single player that played for the state, you kind of see how the state of Queensland itself emerges over different decades. You've got Sam Bacco out with his mother on the street, handing out pamphlets so the Indigenous people could get the right to vote. You had, I think it was, I'm trying to think of the name, from Emerald, the winger, McIndoe. So he was saying when he was a boy, he was actually discouraged from playing sports with Indigenous guys because he wanted to go do boxing, and they said, no, don't do that. All the Indigenous kids box, so you're better off going to the rugby league club. And to see how those those attitudes changed in time, and now obviously Jonathan Thurston, Greg Inglis, some of our most famous and revered stars, and including right back to Artie Beetson from that background. So I think it's fascinating to see the way that Queensland itself changed as the players and attitudes changed as well.
Rugby league or any sport, I think it's vital for young men, especially in areas that you said, in remote areas, not to give them something to do, but also to build a reliance on each other, I suppose. What would you call motivation to get out of bed in the morning and to do something for the man standing next to you.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys, I guess, that didn't have guidance as children, and rugby league became that stabilising force and that friendship group that they really needed. There is a quote by Wayne Bennett when he's speaking about it was Wendell Saylor in particular, but it applies to a lot of folks in the game. And he says, I deal with people experiencing abandonment most days of my career. Yeah. And if you look back, you do find, sadly, that is an underlying factor in a lot of the Maroons, and so is personal tragedy. I think when I did the stats about it's roughly twice the normal rate of experiencing trauma, such as in the death or disability or incarceration of a close family member during childhood. So for me, that was one of the really important things I wanted to bring out in this book, is that, they're my heroes, they're your heroes, they're most boys if you grow up, or girls if you grow up in Queensland, they're your heroes, but they've actually been through some quite significant challenges. And if you scratch the surface, there's probably some things every single person can relate to. Some of the guys were bullied at school. Some of them experienced the suicide of a close family member, things that, we all have to come up against at some stage. And I felt that rather than trying to preach to people directly about what they should do, that if they read someone that they can relate to, they can see a path forward. And so as much as it's a rugby league book, I'd like it to be a 14-year-old kid who's struggling to make sense of things and picks up the book because he loves footy, and all of a sudden he's got some inspiration there, or she's got some inspiration.
Yeah, it is exactly that. And I think the wonderful thing about rugby league is, because I don't want to get into a culture or a code war with rugby union, but I just find that rugby league reaches the grassroots of people who really do struggle in life, and they have this opportunity. And rugby league is everywhere. It's played in country Queensland. It's played all over Australia. We just don't know about it, but it just sort of has that that aura about it, rugby league, that the working class man just is attracted to, if you know what I mean. It's not we want to know where you came from, like in your book, but we also want to know why you've become who you are with this game. It's just, it's like I said, I don't want to get into a class war, but it just seems that rugby league touches people who have struggled more than perhaps the other sports of hockey and rugby union maybe.
Yeah, for sure. And introduces you to people of different cultures or different walks of life that you may not have interacted with.
Most certainly. Well, so it's a wonderful book. Now, the Maroons, or is it the Maroons? How do you? It's
I've always pronounced it the Maroons. Yeah.
Yeah. But I just wonder technically. Now, your book, just quickly, I've seen some posts. It's been spotted in different parts of the world, mate. This must be really, really hair on the back of your neck sort of stuff to see your book in some of the shelves that are around the world.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So it's in all the big W's and Targets and QBDs throughout Queensland, and then some other specialty stores in New South Wales. But I have sold books to, I think, India, to Argentina. I'm pretty sure there was one like Iceland or something like that. So it's quite strange
how spread out
it is. And also, I've met some people that are, like motivational speakers, etc., and they're interested in what it is that captures the Queensland spirit, because they can apply that to business people. And that's really interesting, is moving in those circles that I never really considered when I was writing the book.
Most certainly. And I just saw a post the other day from Matthew Johns about that. Obviously, they can't sell out down in New South Wales, and the caption is, we just don't get it. And I know we haven't got, which we had all day to talk about, right? How can we, why are we us and they're them? Is it a silver spoon, we've been the greatest all along, we're superior to Queensland, that's what drives us to pump them? What do you put it down to?
I've got two pretty strong thoughts on this. And one is because Queensland, until recently, only had a population of like 3 million people, I think, when State of Origin started. So, in most walks of life, they say you have 7 degrees of separation. I think everyone in Queensland probably has 3 degrees of separation from an Origin player. You probably know someone who knows someone who is best mates, or, in my case, I grew up in the same team as Sean Berrigan, and we had guys like Fatty Vaughton and Michael Hagan around my footy club all the time. So you kind of got that influence directly. And then the other thing is, for those who are also geography geeks like me, Queensland's the most decentralised state. So we have the most rural towns, like we have the greatest population spread over these regional towns. And if you read into child development theory, they say that towns of between 0 and 10,000 people are perfect for creating elite sports people, because they'll be asked to step up at a younger age group to play older players. They'll have more access to open and free spaces to play footy. And another really interesting thing I found was you're more likely to have a coach, or maybe even just a member of the community, who sees you and thinks you're something special, and they'll tell you that, and they'll support you all the way through, because maybe there's only 20 kids in that town that they can support. Whereas if you go to the big city, say, a club like Redcliffe, although they've been quite successful and provided a lot of Origin players, if you're there, you might have 100 and something kids that you're up against, and to get a single mentor to be interested in you and follow you the whole way through your career, that's quite difficult. So I think because Queensland has so many of those towns in that 0 to 10,000 range, like Bundaberg, Roma, Mackay, etc. Actually, Mackay would be quite a bit more now, but back in those days, that's the reason, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, because we're of the age, maybe me, not you, but it originated from us getting flogged by New South Wales. But that's not what drives us anymore, is it? It's exactly what you've said, because there's not many of us, obviously the older, but the kids don't relate to what happened in the 70s or 60s until the early 80s. So it's interesting how we've shifted from history to what's best for us now, I suppose, in rugby league circles, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, and I think a big thing you'll notice, obviously, over the last 10 years with Queensland is the amount of Pacific Islander players that have come in. And if you look at some of the places they grew up or where their family's from, they almost mirror those Queensland towns in a way. So like the place where Lottie Takiri grew up, it's only a very small place. And that very small town has produced something like, I think it's 20 elite rugby league and rugby union players from this one village. So you find places like that. Where Valentine Holmes is from, where his family's from in the Cook Islands, is basically a few huts. So I've traced back all that stuff, and that fascinates me, finding out exactly where their families came from. And you actually find a bit of history about the Pacific that we probably don't realise as Aussies day to day. And someone like, say, Josh Maguire, he's got Samoan descent, but that comes via German lineage who, there were wars in Samoa that the Germans were involved in. And I found all these things that I was probably, quite oblivious to. So
exactly, yeah. Well, and Luke Page obviously plays for PNG International as well, and it comes down here and now this love of, mate, I could talk to you all day. The Maroons is a wonderful book. Get out there and get a copy. I'm going to ask you now a stupid question. Who's going to win tonight?
Oh, mate, Queensland. For sure.
Queensland indeed. Mate, Rob Burgin, always a pleasure, mate. Oh, and quickly, you got another one in the pipeline, another book?
I'd like to write one about the journey of the Latin Heat, how we've gone from basically introducing the sport to Latin America to this year's World Cup, the Women's World Cup being the first time a Brazil team has competed there. Yeah. But just a matter of whether I can generate enough interest in that globally as you can in the Maroons.
I think you could write a book about what's going to happen between now and kick-off with your 5 Brazilian mates, mate. That will be an interesting story. And what they have to say after the game would be even more intriguing to see what their thoughts are about this whole crazy thing that is Origin, mate. But congratulations on what you've been doing with the Heat in Brazil and that. And I what's his name? Wayne Bennett's book, Don't Let the Music Die on You. I don't think the music of rugby league is ever going to die on you, Rob Burgin. You're certainly an epitome. You even got the maroon beard. It's all happening with the white number.
Same with you, John.
Okay, mate. All the best, Robbie. Thanks, mate.
Cheers. Appreciate it. Thank you.